All right, let's go. Welcome to eCom Reality episode 27. And in this one, we will chat about Google reps and why most of them just tend to suck, right? That's the harsh reality. If you haven't watched the previous episode, I actually recommend after finishing this one because that one was about meta reps. And as we know, Meta, Google, they are huge companies making tens of billions of dollars in profit, primarily from advertising. However, if you go on a call with any kind of Google rep or Meta rep, in 90+% of cases, you will go through, let's say, not the best experience, right? And why is that? Well, if you've listened to the Meta reps one, you'll have already a lot of context, but let's rewind and shortly recap what was mentioned in that one. And the fact is that Google makes, as I said, tens of billions of dollars. And especially for most of us out there who aren't spending at least millions, we are just a tiny fraction of their revenue. So would they actually need to get you the best results if you're just spending $100, $50, right? Because we also have to think in terms of business. They are publicly listed companies. They have shareholders. They need to make money for their shareholders. I'm also a shareholder of Google, of Meta. I love the companies. However, we need to be aware that you don't get the same level of support if you're just starting out or just spending even thousands or tens of thousands, while there are other brands out there who are spending tens of thousands per day, not per month, or hundreds or millions per month, right? So that is why we have to think in terms of their priorities. That's why in most cases, if we spend a small amount, we'll get the smallest reps they have in terms of their salaries, in terms of their expertise. And that doesn't mean they don't have a higher level of support, because they do have a higher level of support as well. However, you do get that level of support just if you are actually spending more. And that's why in most cases you will get a beginner rep if you're also, let's say, in the beginning stages and not exactly at multi-million dollar level with the brand that you have or that you're managing for the brand owner, or depending who you are, right? You could be a media buyer, you could be an agency, you could be the actual brand owner or the marketing manager and so on. So you could have different roles. But when you get on a call with a Google rep, in most cases you'll just get sold on the idea of maximizing your budget, right? So that's usually what you'll get, right? If you haven't been on those calls, let me just tell you how it usually goes. Some intros, then let's look at the account, and then the recommendations, because that's what you're there for. Maybe you are there for some suggestions and so on, but at the same time, you could just read Google's articles about their best practices and also look at their recommendations when you actually enter the platform, right? Because they do have multiple recommendations there in Google Ads. And in most cases, when it comes to actually implementing something, most reps will tell you to either increase the budget, just because you're almost always limited by budget. But if you spend more, it doesn't mean you'll make more, or at least not proportionally, right? For example, think like this. You spend $1,000, you make 3,000 free ROAS, right? Then if you double your spend from 1,000 to 2,000, right? 100% increase 2 times. Does that mean that you'll go from 3,000 in revenue to 6,000? 99.9% of cases, no. You will get diminishing returns, meaning that if you spend 1,000 more, you won't get 3,000 more in revenue. You'll probably get maybe 1K, 2K, 1.5. So it could be anywhere between that. And even Google will actually show you some forecasts. But when it says you can spend more, that just means that you can spend more. And Of course you can spend more. It's just like, can you work out more? Yeah, you can work out more. Can you eat more? Yeah, you can eat more. Can you sleep more? Yeah, you can sleep more. There's always more that you can do, but there are diminishing returns. And this is where, in some cases, in most cases actually, no Google rep will tell you. So this is like the diminishing return part, right? Where you will not hit your goals anymore. And the fact is that most of them won't even know your goals. So this is why those calls don't really go as well as they could, because they don't always ask the right questions. You probably also are not very prepared, because even myself, when I go on a call, I know I will have 30 minutes on that one, right? I mean, in 30 minutes, you can go over your entire business. You would have to be perfect at communicating, and even then, you might have some seconds where you will not talk about the right things. So that's the issue. And besides that, besides the fact that you'll get the recommendation to actually spend more, which, as I said, it's not proportionally going to grow your business, and most business owners want actually to make some profit, not just like spend more to make more. We need to think in terms of profit. And the next recommendation in most cases will be to go to the auto apply section on Google and then actually check as many boxes you have there, such as, let's say, remove redundant keywords. That's actually decent. Or check the ad rotation. That's also decent. However, then you have some where they are actually forcing your bidding, meaning that if you have a target ROAS and then you check one of the boxes from there that says that it would change the bidding to max conversions, then Google has your approval that they can actually change the bidding from target ROAS, which is actually an efficiency based bidding. So it only spends in theory when it can get you sales, right, at the ROAS that you want. However, max conversions means let's just spend it, doesn't matter if we get sales or not, right? And this is the issue, because you don't really care about spending more. So this is counterintuitive to what you actually want. And this is why automations don't really work, because there's so much context that it doesn't have, the AI doesn't have, right? Just right now, actually, I made, and let me show you real quick, and this is relevant for when I'm making this video, I made one of those toy mockups in ChatGPT, and let me show you. So I made one of these toy mockups here because it seems like it's popular. I don't think there's anything here that I shouldn't show. So it's basically just me as, let's say, a toy, slightly bigger mustache, even way too many muscles, honestly. But then some things that ChatGPT knows about me, such as me liking investing, doing meta ads, being more of an INTJ personality, and so on. And protein is king. Yeah, that's cool. And this is context that ChatGPT has about me, right? Some context, but it still doesn't have enough, right? Like in that one, there's no coffee, and I drink coffee a lot. So this is where it's really important to actually take the time, energy to learn about someone's business, because business is actually, I wouldn't say necessarily like serious. It doesn't have to be serious, but when you take decisions, they do have to be serious, right? Like when you communicate, it doesn't have to be serious. Like you can joke around, you can lol and so on. But when you take decisions, ideally you make decisions that actually grow the business, right? Because otherwise it dies, and then you don't have, let's say, a business, you don't have a client, you don't have who to service, depending on who you are on this market. And the thing with reps is that they are not paid based on your success, right? They are paid by Google, and Google pays them because Google makes money. And how does Google make money? Because someone actually spends. So it's in their best interest for you to spend. It's just like with agencies that charge percentage of ad spend, right? That's why I'm not a big fan, even though probably I could have made more money during my lifetime if I charged based on percentage of spend. But I know that it's not going to work long term, right? It's just like with anything. If you pretty much know it's not going to work long term, ideally you don't get into it, right? Just like with crypto, with stocks, you know that there's a difference between the two. You know that in most cases, or in terms of the likelihood of what can happen in the future, stocks will be here for a very long time. Crypto, it might be, but there is a lower likelihood if we think in terms of actual logic, right? Because it doesn't necessarily bring any value. So except, let's say, Bitcoin, and now we're getting into other subjects, it's clear that the stock market just has more baked into it, meaning that it's real companies, it's our money that we spend, right? We are the ones that actually are buying the iPhones or whatever phone or products from the companies, and that's why they actually make money. So that's why they exist, that's why they can offer you a dividend, and that's why their share price increases. And that's what Google, coming back to it, also thinks of their company, of what they can do. And in most cases, helping almost anyone who wants to advertise on Google is not in their best interest, right? That's why you'll get someone from, in most cases, I think India, sometimes maybe Canada, but that's where most of the reps that I've talked with are. Of course, I've had some from the US, and it was also higher level support. So that was one reason. But in most cases, you will get someone from India, and I'm not saying that they could not be competent, right? Because actually I'm from Europe, and Europeans are not the most competent. And that's because of the weather, the mindset, and so on, right? So I would gladly have someone from, let's say, the US in most cases, or if there was anyone in the Philippines, that would also be cool, just because they have a great mindset. But it's clear that in most cases, you do get what you, let's say, pay for, right? And in this case, it's depending on how much you spend on Google, you will get a higher level of support. So coming back as a conclusion, are Google reps useless? Most of them, but then of course it depends also on you and what you are looking for. If you are looking for high level advice from a Google rep, and if you're a good, great, amazing media buyer, or even agency owner, or even business owner, it will be a little bit tougher to get too much value out of that call. So just be aware of that, right? Because I do have calls maybe twice a year with a Meta rep, with a Google rep, and yeah, it never goes magnificent. I don't get much out of it, but it's only 40 minutes, right? So as long as you don't think about it as a waste of time, it's just let's say 30 minutes that you need to take in front of your computer. And ideally you do take around 40 minutes more to actually take some notes and see what you would want to ask, and maybe even ask ChatGPT how I could get the most out of this call. And in most cases, it's maybe asking one or two specific questions that can help one or two campaigns that you have. And at the same time, you can ask for some data that they might be able to share with you, and that could be it. Otherwise, if you're just going on a call without any preparation, it will probably feel pretty useless. So it's just like in real life, the other person has to come prepared and communicate well, and you also have to do the same thing. So with that being said, that's pretty much it for this one. You can watch it together with the one about Meta reps, and should be even more helpful, just because in that one we were focusing more so on the value of an employee for the company. And with that being said, if you enjoyed it, you can leave a like, and until next time, peace out.